So good morning or good afternoon to you all, wherever you may be joining us from, and thank you for subscribing to our webinar on Brexit, which will be delivered today by our Managing Director, Hector. As you all know, on the 31st of January 2020, the UK left the European Union and is now in a transition period. But what does this mean and what happens from here? So today Hector will be giving an in-depth review of the economic effects of the different post-Brexit scenarios from both the UK and the EU's perspective, along with potential implications for the food and feed industry. So today's presentation will be approximately 30 minutes long, and we'll try and leave some time for some questions at the end. So please all use the chat function at Zoom to ask any questions that you may have during the presentation, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can at the end. Hector, over to you.
Let's begin with our presentation about Brexit for the food and feed industries. I would like to give you an overview of the impact that Brexit will have for industry during the next few months. This is a summary of the content that I would like to show you today. We will start with some context about Europe, the UK, and today's world. Then I would like to recapitulate to see where are we now. Because it is a no deal still possible, but we will find out because the current negotiations will be very, very contentious. Then I would like to give you an overview of the case for Northern Ireland and finally drawing some conclusions. So let's begin with the context. Europe, in the UK, in today's world. The UK is a small fish in a big pond. It's currently less than 1% of the world population, but it is still the fifth or the sixth largest economy considering the individual countries. On the contrary, the European Union is a big fish in a big pond. Without the UK, it is still 6% of the world population, but it is the second largest trading bloc in the world, at least for the time being, because, as you may imagine, it's losing relevance. Because the still number one is America, which represents more than 4% of the world population. In the second place, as in individual countries, obviously China, which is nearly 1.4 billion people. In the third place, Japan. In the fourth place is Germany. Now, in this map, I would like to show you a little bit a different perspective on where the UK sits. You will see the UK is a small population, 66 million, and a small territory. If you compare that with India, which is more than 1.3 billion people and a large territory, and is more or less the same size as the UK, you will reckon that India will have more growth in the future than the UK may have. If we look at the GDP, we will see that the UK is a relatively small economy compared with the EU, the USA, or China. Let's have a look at UK trade in 2018 as a reference. The total exports of the UK in 2018 were about 634 billion pounds. The total imports were 665 billion pounds. Of the exports, the UK export to the EU nearly 46% of all, and import about 53% of all the imports from the EU. So, taken as a whole, the EU is the UK's largest trading partner. So let's recapitulate now. How did the EU start? Well, at the end of the World War II, in 1945, about 50 to 60 million people died only in Europe as a consequence of that. It's estimated that a similar amount died in Asia. The economy has completely collapsed in the whole of Europe, and most infrastructure was completely destroyed. So the leaders of Germany and France decided that they should find a way to avoid war in Europe again. So in 1952, they came up with the idea of the Steel and Coal Agreement, which they make participate also Italy and the Benelux. Now you will wonder why steel and coal? Well, if you want to go to war, you need to manufacture weapons, and those weapons to manufacture you need steel and coal. So by putting under common control those two resources, you will make virtually impossible for any of those 6 countries to go to war behind the other's back. But soon they realized that they needed something else if this peace should be long-standing. So in 1957, they created the common market to establish an economic integration and a customs union between the 6 countries. By increasing the reliance in trade between different countries and different companies in those countries, they make sure they will be more difficult to go to war in the future. That common market passed through some enhancements. For example, in 1973, the UK, Ireland, and Denmark joined, and in 1980, Greece joined, and also did Spain and Portugal in 1986. Then in 1993, the single market and the 4 freedoms were created, which means the free movements of capital, goods, services, and people. And the irony of the situation is that that was largely a British invention. It was based on Lord Cockfield's white paper, who wrote in 1985. There were other enhancements after that. In 1995, Austria, Sweden, and Finland joined, and then in 2004, it was the big push to the east, where several former under the Soviet Union orbit countries joined the Union, and also Malta and Cyprus. And finally, in 2007, the remaining 2 big countries joined, and in 2013, Croatia did. Now, what are the goals and purpose of the European Union? Well, as I said at the beginning, the first one is to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of its citizens. Also to offer a space of freedom, security, and justice without internal borders. With sustainable development based on balanced economic growth and price stability, with a highly competitive market, with full employment, social progress, and environmental protection. Because one of the objectives also is to combat social exclusion and discrimination, promoting at the same time scientific and technological progress, enhancing economical, social, and territorial cohesion and the solidarity among its members, respecting its rich cultural and linguistic diversity, and establish an economic and monetary union with the euro at its center. Now, why the British people decided to leave the European Union? Well, I think that it was a mixture of different grievances that have been festering for quite a while in the UK. I think it goes back as the protest against the Iraq war. The British people was very much against that war, but the government decided to ignore this and go and join the Americans into invade Iraq. Then in 2007-2008, we have the economic crisis, where banks were rescued, bankers were not punished, but at the same time, people were losing jobs and sometimes their homes. In 2009, you have the Members of Parliament scandal, where some Members of Parliament were using the funds that they received to develop their activity for things that were nothing to do with being a Member of Parliament. That reinforced the idea on the British mind that there were 2 types of citizens. In 2010, the new Tory government decided to apply a very drastic austerity campaign, which further damaged the prospects of the lower echelons of society. So all this compound to grievances by the British people against the government and what is so-called the establishment. According with the Oxford professor Paul Collier, the author of The Future of Capitalism, Brexit was a response to the breaking of social contract between the elite and the masses, and between the metropolis and the rural areas, because people were starting to see that the elevator didn't work anymore. Now, the current situation is that the UK, after the referendum, the pound lost 20% of its value. UK also lost the European Medicines Agency and the European Banking Authority. And also, the UK lost the trust of the rest of the European Union members. And what it may happen in the future is that these strained relationships between the EU and the UK will continue, and a UK which is isolated from the EU most probably will have to look across the Atlantic to the States for support. The EU is not very happy that the UK would like to be a low taxation, low worker protection, and low environmental standards, too close to the continent and too big to be ignored. The EU is seeing the UK more and more as a systemic competitor. So, where are we now? Well, the withdrawal agreement established that on the 31st of January this year, the UK is no longer part of the European Union, which triggered the start of the transition period, which will last until the 31st of December of this year, unless the UK government or the EU ask for an extension before the 30th of June of this year, and that may extend the period until the end of 2021 or the end of 2022. However, the Prime Minister have already said several times that he is not going to ask for an extension, so the only time that we have to reach an agreement is within the remains of this year. Because of the withdrawal agreement, Northern Ireland will remain with these special circumstances. And here's the first consequences for industry. Because UK companies are no longer in the EU, in order to carry on doing trade, they will need, with immediate effect, to have an EU representative office. For the time being, nothing else will change very much. No hard border with EU countries, at least now. But it is possible that is still a no deal. Well, the agreement negotiations should be finished before the 31st of December of 2020. But if those negotiations are unsuccessful, well, there is no deal scenario. The UK will still be bound to protect European Union citizens in Britain, and Northern Ireland will remain under the EU single market and the UK customs union. And there will be a hard border in the Channel. And what will be the consequences of that hard border for the food and feed industry? Well, on the 1st of January, the transition period will be over, and the UK will become a third country like any other under the World Trade Organization rules. So UK companies will become exporters to the European Union. So all UK products will become an importation into the EU. It's no longer an intra-community acquisition. That means border control from day one. You will have to pay the VAT at the border. You will have your documents checked. You will have to have an Incoterms declaration. Now, last year, during a meeting that I participated in the British Chamber of Commerce, they stated that in today's scenario, without a no-deal agreement, so the EU is still, the UK is still part of the EU customs union currently, there are 55 million declarations prepared every year. In a no-deal scenario, they estimate there will be 300 million. So my advice to you will be now to get a customs agent as soon as possible, because they are going to be a very high demand. The other problem is that tariffs will apply for almost all products, and some of those will be very punished tariff, like for example lamb will be estimated to be charged 80%. There will be further restrictions of other types, for example live animals. There may be quarantines, animal byproducts. Another consequence is that any UK citizen living in the EU should have applied already for residency, and that will be country by country. Some countries will be easier than others. All UK certifications will no longer valid in the EU. All UK degrees will no longer valid in the EU unless they have been validated before exit day. All UK veterinary certifications will no longer valid in the EU either. Neither driving license or transport permits. The other problem is that if you are selling currently to a third country under the umbrella of an EU trade agreement, like for example to Canada or Japan, on the 1st of January you won't be able to do that unless the UK have managed to secure an agreement with one of those countries before, which is extremely unlikely. Also, any UK product will no longer fall under rules of origin for the European Union. So if you're selling something to a company in the EU and that company is exporting that into any other country of the world, your product will no longer count as a rule of origin. Maybe your client will have to change supplier. If you have secured any binding origin information from any EU country, it will be void from the 1st of January. You will have to have proof of origin if you would like to carry on selling into the EU. But before that, in order to become an authorized exporter, you will have to apply for an economic operator registration identification number. That means that all UK products will have higher cost in the EU, and because of the increased bureaucracy and delays, those also produce increased costs. Don't forget data protection law. The UK will no longer protect it by that. So all sensitive data that you may have, you will have to move them to servers and repositories on other EU country. In summary, UK companies and industry will be less competitive in the EU. What will be the no-deal scenario for EU companies currently selling to the UK? The first thing you need to do is to open a representative office in the UK, because those shipments will be no longer inter-community, they will be export to third countries. And you will face a similar situation but in the other direction. You will have also border controls, you will have to pay VAT, you will have your documents checked, you will have to have an income tax declaration, you may face tariffs for certain products and maybe restrictions for others. On the 10th of February, Michael Gove said that the UK will apply exactly the same measures to EU companies exporting to the UK than EU will apply to UK companies trying to export to the EU. Because all EU products become an importation into the UK. If you are trying to send live animals, they will require inspection at the border because EU veterinary certification will be no longer valid in the UK. Any EU personnel that you may have live and working in the UK will have applied for settled status already. EU driving license and transport permits will be no longer valid in the UK either. Neither the certifications issued by EU countries, nor university degrees issued by EU universities. So what happened with no-deal scenario for non-EU companies that at some point, for strategic reasons, decided to set up shop in the UK? Well, those companies will find their offices, plants and factories that will become located within a third country. So you will have to immediately open a new representative office in the EU, because the current UK office that you have should remain for the British market. All product ships from the UK to the EU will become an export. And all EU personnel that you may have working in the UK should have also applied for settled status if they want to carry on living and working in the UK. Any EU certifications you may have will be no longer valid in the UK. Any person with a EU university degree will no longer valid unless they be validated. And that will produce increased costs because of bureaucracy and logistic complexity. You may need to rearrange your logistic decisions to avoid re-exporting from the UK to the EU products that you were intended to send to the EU in the first place. So what is the state of the current negotiations? Well, in theory, on the 1st of January next year, the new agreement should rule the trade between the UK and the EU. And then the UK will become a third country with a trade deal. This trade deal should govern the relationship between the UK and the EU from that point onwards. The market access will depend on how much the UK follows EU regulations. But it's extremely unlikely that this new trade deal will be equivalent or even better than the EU membership. The most likely scenario is that the regulatory burden between the UK and the EU will increase, because there are several points of friction that can jeopardize the outcome at any point during the negotiations. What are those points of friction? First, the problem about goods, because the EU will very much like that the UK to follow EU regulations. They should be mandatory to avoid tariffs, customs, and non-tariff barriers. There also will be a problem for services combined with goods, or for services alone. For example, the role of the city, it's very much in doubt, because as you may imagine, the EU is not very keen on allowed the City of London to carry on being the biggest euro-denominated bonds trade area in the world. The other problem is that the European Union will like the deal to be enforced by the Court of Justice, and the UK will not allow even to consider that possibility. Finally, the small issue of the fisheries rights, which may end on if the UK doesn't accept fishermen from the rest of Europe to access its territorial waters. They may find that the UK fishermen will catch all the fish, but they wouldn't have any port to land that catch, because the European Union will accept that fish. All in all, what the European Union is trying to get is what they call a level playing field. They would like that the UK follows the EU lead on workers' rights, environmental standards, subsidy to industry, tax policy. As I mentioned before, the UK is perceived as a systemic competitor which is too big and too close to the continent. Now, what's the case for Northern Ireland? Well, because of the withdrawal agreement signed by the UK, Northern Ireland will remain in the European Union single market and customs union, at least in theory. Northern Ireland will continue to follow EU rules on agricultural and non-manufactured goods. Customs control then will have to be moved to ports and airports between Northern Ireland and the UK, in other words, in the Irish Sea. The purpose, obviously, is to avoid a hard border in the land between Northern Ireland and the Republic. However, because it's not still very clear how those customs controls will work and how they will avoid that goods coming from mainland UK into Northern Ireland and finally in the Republic, so in the rest of the EU, that still has to be decided. And my suspicion is that finally Northern Ireland will not only be in the EU single market, but also in the EU customs union. That will lead to a significant trade barrier between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. That legal framework has to be reviewed every 4 years, and that will be reviewed by the majority of members of the Legislative Assembly, present and at least 40% of each Republican and Unionist designated representatives present and voting, to avoid that any of the two communities impose the other something that they don't want. Don't forget also that the Court of Justice will have jurisdiction on Northern Ireland regarding the Union treaties. And the UK, because it signed on the withdrawal agreement, has the legal obligation to maintain these provisions. So what are my conclusions? Brexit is not finished yet. At least it will drag on for the rest of these years, or maybe even beyond that. Reaching a fully comprehensive trade deal before the end of this year is very, very challenging. But if those trade negotiations fail, remember, no deal applies. And that means disruption for trade, border controls, increased costs, and disruption for logistic chains. But if an agreement is reached, it will be inferior to current membership. And that will increase friction for trade between the UK and the EU, increasing bureaucracy and costs for UK businesses to access the EU market. And finally, In my opinion, the Northern Ireland will become a protectorate of the European Union. Thank you for your attention, and shortly Hannah will come back with some questions.
So thank you, Hector, for your very comprehensive analysis of the different post-Brexit scenarios. Very, very interesting and thought-provoking. We do have some time for some questions now, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. But if we don't, for whatever reason, what we'll do is we'll send a follow-up email to everyone with all of the questions and answers that we received today. So looking at the questions that we've received. So number one. Will the EU feed regulation still be applicable in the UK? In other words, will the UK adopt the same EU regulations that they have been following since the creation of the EU?
Well, I think that the UK government has said several times that they will incorporate EU law in the statutory book. Now, the problem, I think, is that the situation may change if they go for a no deal. Within a deal agreement, obviously, they will have to be more inclined to respect the EU legislation, but if in case no deal, I think that they will start to drift away from the EU and then make some differences within time, but it won't be an immediate effect. It probably will take a few years before that something like that happens.
Yes, and I think they'll have more pressing issues to deal with if, in the event of a no deal.
Yeah, I think so too.
Food and feed regulations will probably come lower down their list, but we'll see. We will see. So number two is, what is the procedure to open an EU representative office?
Well, I will separate two cases. One where you want like somebody to represent your registrations, for example. That's a relatively simple issue. You simply need somebody who represents your interest before the Commission, and that you communicate, I think, if I remember correctly, through an email with the Commission with an official letter. Where the owner of the registration states that from this point in time this company will represent them in the European Union. And a different matter if you would like to sell. Then if you would like to sell and you need somebody who is responsible for that product in the market, placed in the market, and then that will require that company or entity should be a food business operator or a food business operator. And then be registered properly within the local authorities.
Yes, because the FBO is legally, or the food business operator is legally responsible for any product recalls, the labelling, yes, etc. So it's very important to have the food business operator registration in place. Number three, so will the Food Standards Agency in the UK, the FSA, will they follow the EFSA guidelines in order to assess the safety and efficacy of food and feed products, regulated products, or do you think they're going to publish their own guidance documents?
I think that at this point in time, the FSA has said several times that they will follow the same procedures as it is in today's European Union. But as I mentioned before, that will depend very much on how the situation evolves in terms of it won't be the same if there is a deal and there is a no deal. Obviously, if you have a deal, the FSA will be compelled to respect the European Union assessments and the European Union requirements. But if the UK decided to go for a no deal, for whatever reason, then the FSA could decide to go its own way. I think that if they decide to go its own way, it will add to the difficulties for UK businesses, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from what we've heard from the Food Standard Agency, they will, at the moment, they're planning on following the current guidance, but then, anything could happen. Exactly. So we will just have to wait and see, I'm afraid. Another interesting question, similar to the last one, will the FSA follow the same approach as the EU regarding food and feed products that need authorization? For example, will novel foods have to undergo another risk assessment to get an authorization? if they've already undergone a risk assessment in the EU? And will the definition of novel food still apply in the UK? So do you think they'll follow the same sort of legal definitions and terminology?
Again, I think that we have to make a difference between following a deal or no deal. With the deal, I think that the UK and the food standards agency will have no option but to follow very closely what the EU current guidance are, or how those guidance evolve in the future. Now, if we have a no deal, then anything could happen. Considering that today the European Union is the most demanding regulatory environment in the world, I think it's very, very difficult that the UK will go further than that. What it could happen if there is no deal is that in order to please other areas of the world, like for example America, the food standards agency may lower the requirements, which I think that it will make difficult for UK products to enter the European Union market, because they will have to pass two different assessments. But as I said, in case of no deal, anything could happen because there's no rules, basically.
Well, exactly, and until the 1st of January next year, then the FSA will follow the current legal definitions that are used in the EU. But as Hector said, we'll just have to wait and see. This is another really good case. So somebody's asked about CBD, so cannabidiol. This is obviously a very hot topic at the moment, and they're asking, will the UK reconsider the novel food status of CBD?
Well, I think that at this point, don't think that the UK will be very flexible on that, because they give it the deadline, and that deadline is 31st of March 2020, and there's no symptoms or evidence that there will be any kind of flexibility on that respect. The UK, for the time being, until the 31st of December, is obliged legally to follow the EU lead on all these matters. What happened after the 31st of December is a matter of speculation, especially if we have no deal.
No, I would agree. I mean, it was just in the news very recently that the UK is already sort of striking out on its own around the regulating CBD. So what they've asked is all companies that have already selling CBD containing products on the market, that all of these companies need to submit a dossier to support the safety of their products by the 31st of March in 2021. So they're already sort of forging their own path in that respect. So that's an interesting development. Another question, will applicants have to prepare separate dossiers where relevant for obtaining feed approvals in the UK? Well,
it depends from where. For the time being, as far as I understand, until the 31st of December, the UK will follow the EU on that respect, and dossiers that are under revision should be carrying on being under revision, and the verdict of the European Union will be respected by the UK. But what happened after the 1st of January, it's again a little bit of matter of speculation, because if we have a deal, that deal may include the acceptance of the UK by EU authorizations. But if there is no deal, the UK practically can do whatever they want. So they may require a separate authorization from the UK, no matter if the authorization is already issued by the EU.
I think in the best case, if you're registering a product in the EU and you've written a dossier, the best case would be just a notification process or mutual recognition between Europe and the UK. But I'm an optimist, so that's what I would be hoping for. Well, that's the thing.
I mean, the mutual recognition will be an ideal situation, but that will require some kind of a deal. Mm-hmm. And if the negotiations broke down before the end of this year, or for whatever reason they don't reach a deal, everything is up in the air. So there's no guarantee of a mutual recognition, no guarantee of a UK following anything. The UK can do basically whatever they want.
So worst case, if you want to sell your products in the EU and UK, then you need to register and submit a dossier meeting the requirements for EFSA and the European Commission in the EU,
Yes.
and then another set of
a
a dossier and another set of requirements in the UK.
Exactly.
Oh dear, oh dear. So we've got a very brief question on labelling. So somebody has asked what changes will apply to labelling of products.
Well, if you export products to the EU has to have a food business operator registration number, and the EU organic logo must be there from the 1st of January next year. Unless your UK control body is authorized in the EU. But again, we are having the same problem here. It's not the same if the EU and the UK reach an agreement, which will cover a lot of the things in a very precise detail. But if there is no deal, as I mentioned in my presentation, UK certifications will be no longer valid in the EU. So if you want to sell a product in the EU, you will have to get the EU certification for that product. And because of the way international relationships work, they will be the same the other way around. If you would like to sell a EU product in the UK, and because the EU certification will no longer valid, you will need to certificate them in the UK as well before selling the product in the UK. So there is a big difference between reaching an agreement or not reaching an agreement. In other words, for industry, life will be very, very difficult without an agreement.
Absolutely. So I think it's been a really interesting presentation, and you very clearly explained all the different possible scenarios, but during this transition period anything could happen. So
yeah, for the transition period, business as usual, but once the transition period ends, there will be a huge difference between having a deal or not having a deal. That's the reality.
Okay, great. So I think we've run out of time now. So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope that you found the presentation very, very useful. If you have any further questions, then please follow up and send us an email to our info@ email address. So it's info@pentech-consulting.eu, and we'll be very happy to answer any follow-up questions that you have. And also what we can do is after the presentation, we will send you all a copy of the slides and a summary of the questions and answers. Thank you very much.